A billionaire's wife and best friend plot his destruction. Only his invisible poor housemaid stands between him and certain death. Welcome to the channel, where ancient wisdom meets modern storytelling. If you're new to this journey, please subscribe, give this video a thumbs up, and also share with your friends and family, as it means everything. Sir, please. Chief Emeka Okafor stopped dead in his tracks. One hand adjusting his Rolex, the other gripping his Mercedes keys, he stared down at the young woman kneeling on his marble floor. Amaka, the housemaid, her eyes red with tears, hands clasped together, trembling like a leaf in Harmattan wind. Emeka asked, his voice sharp with irritation. Amaka looked up, her voice shaking like rain on corrugated iron. "Please, sir. Don't go." Emeka blinked, confusion washing over him like sudden thunder. "I had a dream, sir. Last night." Her voice cracked. "You didn't come back. There was blood everywhere. People were shouting your name." The air in the room shifted, became heavy like the moment before lightning strikes. This wasn't dramatic nonsense. Amaka looked genuinely terrified, like someone who had seen the face of death itself. His phone vibrated. Chidi again. He was already late for the biggest deal of his life. The oil contract's worth 2 billion naira. "Get up," Emeka said, his tone low and controlled. "Please, sir," she whispered, pressing her palms to the cold tiles. "I know I'm only a maid, but I couldn't stay quiet." The sound of heels clicking on the staircase interrupted them. Adeze descended like a queen, her silk robe flowing, face already painted with morning makeup. She paused when she saw Amaka on the floor. She asked, her voice cold as December morning. "She's saying I shouldn't leave the house," Emeka replied, not taking his eyes off Amaka. Adeze folded her arms, diamonds catching the light. Amaka didn't move. "Ma, I had a dream. A very clear one." Adeze scoffed like wind through dry leaves. "This is why I told you we need to let this girl go." "Adeze," Emeka started. "No, let me talk," she snapped. "You have the most important meeting of your life this morning. Billions are on the table. Contracts are waiting. And now a housemaid is stopping you with nonsense dreams?" Amaka bowed her head lower. "Get out of the way," Adeze commanded. Emeka raised his hand. Adeze turned sharply. Silence. Emeka's eyes remained fixed on Emeka. Something in her voice. Something honest, unpolished. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. She looked like someone who had seen something she couldn't unsee. Then it happened. That feeling. That quiet warning deep in his chest. No noise, no drama. Just a strong sense that if he stepped out today, he would regret it for the rest of his life. Emeka stepped back. He walked slowly to the center table, dropped his car keys beside his phone, and turned away from the door. Amaka gasped softly, still kneeling. Adeze's mouth fell open. "I'm not going," he repeated, walking into the living room and sitting down heavily. His hands folded in front of him, staring at the marble tiles, like they held answers to questions he didn't know he was asking. Adeze shook her head in disbelief. "She's not manipulating me," he said quietly. Adeze hissed through her teeth, turned, and marched back upstairs, grumbling to herself about superstitious nonsense and wasted opportunities. Amaka slowly stood up, wiped her face, and picked up the cup of water she had left on the table. Her hands were still shaking, and then they sat in silence. Amaka wondering why his heart was beating this fast, why the fear in that girl's eyes felt more real than anything he had felt in years. What he didn't know was that this was just the beginning. 45 minutes later, Emeka's phone rang. His secretary's voice came through shaking like a broken drum. "Sir, your driver." Emeka sat upright as if struck by lightning. "Third Mainland Bridge. A trailer lost control, hit your car. The same Mercedes you normally use. It's somersaulted 3 times. He's in the hospital, unconscious." Her voice broke. Emeka slowly lowered the phone and stared at the floor. The exact car. The exact time he was meant to leave. The exact route he took every morning. He didn't move, didn't speak, just sat there replaying the image in his head. What if he hadn't listened? What if he had brushed off the warning like his wife suggested? The silence in the house suddenly felt loud, pressing against his ears like deep water. Footsteps interrupted his thoughts. Adaize appeared from the hallway, her robe still tied, phone in hand. She asked. Emeka didn't look at her. She raised an eyebrow. Joseph took the car. A trailer hit him. Her hand froze mid-scroll on her phone. She scoffed. "So now you're turning this into a spiritual story?" Emeka looked at her. Really looked. Her face was calm, cold. No sign of worry, no trace of relief that her husband had escaped death. "I'm keeping her," he said. Adaize frowned. "She needs to go." "She caused unnecessary drama," Adaize snapped. "She has no right telling you where to go or what to do. This is my house and I won't let—" "This is my house too." His voice was low but final. Adaize froze. The room went quiet. She blinked, then turned slowly and walked away, leaving behind the smell of expensive perfume and something else, something that felt like guilt. Emeka sat back down, hands pressed together. He wasn't thinking about the maid anymore. He was thinking about something deeper, something wrong. He didn't have proof yet, but he could feel it crawling under his skin like army ants. Something in his life was not as it seemed. To understand how a heart grows cold enough to plan murder, one must first understand the soil in which such darkness takes root. Chidi Nwankwo was born hungry, not for food, but for respect that never came. The second son of a struggling civil servant in Enugu, he grew up watching his father's shirts grow thinner each year, watching his mother count naira notes like prayer beads, always coming up short. "Education is your only weapon," his father would say, polishing shoes that had been resoled 3 times. But importance, Chidi learned early, was measured in naira and kobo, not grades and certificates. While he scored first class in engineering at the University of Nigeria, rich boys like Emeka Okafor sailed through with average grades, but emerged with connections that opened doors Chidi couldn't even see. They met during industrial training at Shell. Emeka with his easy confidence and father's oil connections. Chidi, brilliant but hungry, already calculating how proximity to wealth might feed the emptiness that gnawed at him like termites in wood. "Guy, you're too serious," Emeka had laughed on their first day. But life was hard when your father died of hypertension brought on by financial stress. Life was hard when your mother cleaned offices at night to pay your younger sister's school fees. Life was hard when you watched people who had done nothing to deserve their fortunes live like kings while you scrambled for crumbs. Chidi swallowed his pride and became Emeka's friend, then business partner. For 15 years, he smiled and played the loyal brother while something bitter grew in his chest, like poison vines. The breaking point came during their company's 10th anniversary celebration. No mention of Chidi's engineering expertise. No acknowledgement of the late nights Chidi spent designing projects that made millions. No recognition of the brain that actually made Emeka's visions reality. That night, alone in his Aja apartment that cost a fraction of Emeka's Lekki mansion, Chidi made a decision that would change everything. If Emeka wanted to take all the credit, Chidi would take all the money. The plan began simply: small diversions, fake invoices, gradual transfers to offshore accounts. But simple theft wasn't enough. The hunger had grown too large, and it demanded everything. Ade's was different, but her darkness sprouted from different soil. Born beautiful in a family that had nothing else to offer the world, she learned early that her face was both blessing and curse. Her father, a struggling mechanic in Ibadan, would send her to collect debts from customers who couldn't pay. "Smile at them," he would whisper. She was 14. By 18, she had perfected the art of weaponizing her beauty, knowing which smile made men stupid, which tears made them generous, which promises made them mortgage their futures for a few hours of her attention. She never planned to fall for anyone. Love was a luxury she couldn't afford. But when she met Emeka at that furniture store, something unexpected stirred in her chest. Here was a man who could provide everything she'd never had: security, luxury, respect. She almost loved him, almost. But love requires seeing someone as they truly are, and Emeka saw her as an ornament, a beautiful addition to his successful life. He bought her things, but never asked about her dreams. He displayed her at parties, but never listened to her thoughts. He shared his bed, but never his real self. The marriage became a performance where she played the role of devoted wife while slowly dying inside. And when Chidi approached her 2 years ago with his proposition, love disguised as conspiracy, she grabbed it like a drowning woman grabs driftwood. "We deserve better than this," Chidi had whispered during their first secret meeting. What she didn't know was that Chidi saw her the same way Emeka did, as a tool, a means to an end. But tools, once they've served their purpose, are easily discarded. Both conspirators were about to learn that the universe has ways of protecting those who still possess some fragment of their souls. 3 days after the accident that didn't happen, as Lagos' morning sun painted golden patterns across his dining room floor, something occurred that would change everything. Emeka was flipping through business reports on his tablet. Adezisi had stepped out to answer a call. Amaka came in to clear the breakfast plates. She didn't speak at first. Emeka looked up. She bent slightly, pretending to pick up a dropped napkin. He frowned. Amaka's voice lowered even more, like wind through grass. "I had another dream. This one was clearer. I saw papers. You signed them. Not long after, everything collapsed. You lost your company. Your accounts were frozen. There were policemen, sir." Emeka's blood turned to ice water. Before he could ask more, Ades walked back in. Amaka picked up the tray and left quietly. But the words stayed. They didn't just stay. They sank deep, like stones in still water. Emeka found himself studying Amaka differently after that. Who was this woman who moved through his house like a ghost, seeing things that hadn't happened yet, knowing truths that no housemaid should know? She was young, perhaps 26, with skin the color of rich earth after rain. Her movements held a strange grace, as if she danced to music only she could hear. Most strange of all were her eyes, ancient wisdom dwelling in a young face. She had appeared at his house 6 months ago through an agency. No references from previous employers, but her interview had been unusual. Adaizi had asked, "Because this house needs someone who sees clearly," Amaka had replied, then immediately looked embarrassed. But it was the first answer that haunted Emeka now. 2 days later, Chidi came by the house. He showed up in his usual loud fashion: fresh cologne, designer shirt, million naira smile. He shouted, pulling Emeka in for a hug. "Thank God you didn't enter that car." Emeka gave a small smile. "Let me guess," Chidi continued, "that maid is still around?" Emeka nodded. Chidi laughed. "Omo, you done set." "I don't ignore warnings anymore," Emeka said calmly. Chidi raised an eyebrow but didn't push. "Shah, don't forget, the Dubai deal is still alive." Emeka nodded. Chidi grinned. But that night, when the documents arrived and Emeka opened the folder, his body tensed like a bowstring. Something wasn't right. The numbers looked off. The proposed land value was lower than what they originally discussed. The foreign account listed on the payout page, he didn't recognize it. Most troubling of all, several clauses seemed designed to transfer assets rather than create partnerships. Then he remembered, "Please don't sign any documents this week." Emeka didn't sign. He closed the file and locked it in his drawer. Instead, he made a phone call to an old friend who specialized in forensic accounting. "Kunle, I need you to look at something quietly. No questions, no paperwork." What Kunle discovered 3 days later made Emeka's blood run cold. "This contract," Kunle explained over encrypted WhatsApp messages, "is designed to make you legally responsible for debts you never incurred. The offshore accounts, they're connected to a web of shell companies." The revelation hit like lightning. Not only was Chidi stealing, he was planning to destroy Emeka completely, leave him bankrupted and imprisoned while Chidi disappeared with billions. But the investigation revealed something else. The pattern of theft went back further than expected. 2 years of systematic looting, carefully disguised as legitimate business expenses. And there was another name on several of the offshore account transfers: A. Nkem Okafor, Adaizi's maiden name. His wife wasn't just aware of the conspiracy, she was a full partner. At home, things got worse. "She's too comfortable," Adaizi said one morning, slamming a drawer shut. "Too quiet." Emeka didn't look up from his newspaper. Adaizi folded her arms. Emeka finally looked at her. Adaizi's voice rose. But Adaizi's hostility toward Amaka went deeper than mere domestic politics. From the moment the maid had prevented Amaka from leaving that morning, Adaizi felt exposed, like someone had lit a torch in a room where she preferred darkness. That night, Adaizi locked herself in the guest room. She paced like a caged leopard, then picked up her phone and called Chidi. He answered with a tired voice. "I can't do this anymore," she said, her voice cracking. "He's still protecting that girl. He refused to sack her." "No, she's not. She's a curse. That girl is watching us." Chidi was quiet for a long moment. In his Aja apartment, he stared at the ceiling, calculating. 3 years of planning, millions already transferred, the final phase so close he could taste the freedom. "We're still on track," he said finally. Adaizi snapped. "We've tried everything. You even sent those boys that evening to intercept him on Admiralty Way." Those boys, hired thugs who were supposed to make Emeka's death look like an armed robbery gone wrong. They had waited for hours at the designated spot, but Emeka never showed up. Later, they learned he had taken a completely different route home. because his maid had called him, suggesting he avoid the usual road due to heavy traffic. They were armed, Chidi. They waited for hours. And what happened? He changed routes again. She called him, told him to take another way home. It's like she always knows. A Daisy's voice dropped to a whisper. I'm tired. I hate living here. I hate pretending to be a wife. You love me, Chidi said quietly. Yes, she whispered. That's why I did all this. But it's dragging. It's falling apart. Don't walk away. Then make it happen faster. I can't keep performing this marriage. What neither of them realized was that their phone calls had been monitored for weeks. Not by Emeka, he wasn't that suspicious yet, but by forces that watched over those who needed protection. Amaka had friends in places that existed between the physical and spiritual worlds, and those friends had ways of knowing things that technology couldn't detect. Saturday evening came quiet and slow. Emeka was on the balcony going through audit reports when Adaize walked into the living room in a fitted travel dress. I'll be going tomorrow morning, she said. Emeka didn't look up. Abeokuta, Daddy hasn't been feeling well. He nodded slowly. She waited for more questions, maybe a hug and a safe trip, anything. But Emeka simply returned to his screen. Something about the silence made her nervous, but she smiled and walked away. Emeka didn't move. He didn't show any emotion. But inside, he was already making a call. Follow her quietly. Don't lose sight. Don't interfere. The next morning, Adazi left the house at 7:15 a.m. Her handbag was designer, her smile was soft. She kissed Emeka lightly on the cheek and waved goodbye. By 9:03 a.m., the first update came. She didn't go to Abeokuta. She drove straight to Victoria Island, checked into a boutique hotel on Adedakumbo Ademola Street, room 406. Name on the register, Mrs. Tolu Ogundip. Emeka read the message without flinching. By 9:47 a.m., the second update came. Chidi arrived. Cap pulled low, sunglasses, simple black polo shirt. He didn't check in, went straight upstairs. Same room. Emeka stared at the photo, then sat back slowly. No shock, no panic. The truth had already been beating in his chest for weeks. This was only confirmation. Throughout the day, he received updates like chapters in a book he never wanted to read. 11:30 a.m. room service delivered champagne and strawberries. 2:15 p.m. they ordered lunch. Intimate conversation by the window. 4:45 p.m. Chidi left briefly, returned with shopping bags from expensive stores. Each message was a nail in the coffin of his marriage, but also a piece of evidence that would prove useful later. They didn't come out all day. By 6:20 p.m., Emeka arrived at the hotel in a dark SUV. He didn't tell his driver why. He didn't need to. He got out calmly, walked into the lobby. The receptionist greeted him with a professional smile. He didn't smile back. Room 406, he said. She hesitated. Are you? Emeka brought out his wallet and dropped 2 crisp bundles of notes on the counter. She swallowed hard and handed him the spare key. He didn't rush. He didn't knock. He opened the door. There they were. Adaize, in a white bathrobe, standing near the minibar, holding a glass of wine. Chidi shirtless on the couch, scrolling through his phone like he owned the world. They both looked up at the same time. Everything froze. The wine glass slipped slightly in Adaize's hand. Chidi stood up too quickly, nearly knocking over a bottle of champagne on the coffee table. Emeka didn't say a word. He stepped in, looked at both of them, one after the other, then gently closed the door behind him. Adaize opened her mouth. Nothing came out. Chidi tried to form a smile. Guy, Emeka raised one hand. Chidi froze. Adeze's lip trembled. Emeka, I can explain. Don't lie, Emeka said quietly. She looked at him like a stranger. I stopped trusting you 2 months ago, he said, voice low and clear. Chidi stepped forward, his mind racing through explanations, justifications, anything that might salvage the situation. It's not what you think. It's exactly what I think, Emeka said. Long silence, heavy like storm clouds gathering over Lagos skyline. Emeka turned to Adeze. Her eyes burned with tears that held no remorse, only frustration at being caught. You never saw me, and you were always married to my account, he said. Adeze flinched. Emeka asked quietly. Neither answered. Chidi found his voice first. It's not robbery, it's... You have everything, Emeka. You were born with everything. By stealing from your best friend? By taking from someone who wouldn't even notice it was gone, Chidi snapped, his careful mask finally slipping. Do you know what it's like to watch you buy cars that cost more than my father made in his entire life? The words poured out like poison from a lanced wound. Years of resentment, jealousy, and bitter calculation finally exposed to the light. I earned this money, Chidi continued. Every project, every contract, every brilliant idea that made you billions. That was my brain, my work. Emeka turned to Adeze. And you? I don't need an excuse, she said, her voice gaining strength. I gave you 5 years of my life. 5 years of playing the perfect wife while you treated me like an expensive decoration. Emeka looked between them. So this is love? Don't talk about love, Adeze spat. You don't know what love is. Love isn't buying someone a Birkin bag and thinking you've shown affection. But lying is love? Stealing is love? Planning your humbling, Chidi corrected. Emeka took one final look at both of them. These people he had trusted with his life, his heart, his future. Then he turned, opened the door, and left. No noise, no drama. Just the silence of a man who had finally seen everything he needed to see. That night, Emeka returned home and sat in his study alone. He didn't cry. He didn't break. He made 3 calls, one to his lawyer, prepared divorce papers, the second to his company accountant. Begin the process to buy out Chidi's shares immediately. The third to a friend in the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission. I have evidence of massive financial fraud. The next morning, Chidi arrived at the office to find his access cards deactivated and security waiting to escort him out. The evidence of his financial crimes, bank records, forged documents, offshore account details, was already in the hands of investigators. You can't do this, Chidi said as security flanked him. You stole from this company, Emeka replied calmly. I'll fight this. You'll try. For Adeze, the reckoning came differently. She didn't even bother fighting the divorce. She sent her lawyer with one message. Tell him I agree to everything. Her peace. After trying to have him killed. After planning with a man she slept with in hotel rooms. After sleeping beside him every night while plotting his destruction. She wanted peace. But peace, Emeka learned, was not something that could be negotiated in legal documents. Peace had to be earned, reclaimed, rebuilt from the ashes of shattered trust. The divorce was finalized within 6 weeks. The prenuptial agreement, which Adeze had once complained about, now saved Emeka from losing half his remaining wealth to someone who had spent years trying to steal it all. Chidi was arrested 2 months later. The evidence was overwhelming. Falsified invoices, unauthorized transfers, money laundering through shell companies across 3 countries. His trial would take years, but conviction was certain. Emeka signed the papers with steady hands, but the fire in his chest was another story. He went back to the house that night and sat alone in the dark. The chandelier was on. The curtains were open, but the house felt like a tomb. He had everything, but nothing. And that was when she walked in. Amaka didn't knock. She didn't tiptoe. She walked into the living room the way light walks into darkness. Quietly, but impossible to ignore. "I'm leaving tomorrow," she said, her voice soft but firm. Emeka looked up from the couch. His throat tightened. She didn't blink. Emeka stared at her. Of all the people in his life, this was the one who didn't lie, the one who saw the traps and didn't keep quiet, the one who risked her job, her comfort, even her life for him. "You don't have to go," he said, and this time his voice cracked a little. "I know," she said gently, "but I wasn't sent to stay." Emeka stood up slowly, walked over to her. His heart was heavy. He opened his mouth to speak, but nothing came. So she spoke again. "If you had signed that document," she said quietly, "you would have lost your company, your name, your freedom." His jaw clenched. She took a deep breath. "But you didn't sign. You stayed. You listened." "To start again," she said. They stared at each other. Then Amaka did something that would stay with him forever. She reached into her pocket and withdrew a small object, a cowrie shell worn smooth by countless hands. "My grandmother gave this to me," she said, placing it in his palm. The shell was warm as if it had been resting near a fire. Emeka felt something stir in his chest. Not pain this time, but something like hope. "Keep it." She smiled then. Not the kind of smile that says goodbye, but the kind that says, "You'll be fine." "Live right," she said, backing toward the door. "Trust slowly. Love carefully. Watch everyone." She turned, opened the door, and just like that, she was gone. Emeka stood in that doorway for a long time, the wind brushing past him like a whisper. He didn't chase her. He didn't cry. But deep inside something was breaking and healing at the same time. He walked back into the living room, picked up the wedding photo of him in a daze, stared at it for 5 seconds, then smashed it against the floor. The glass shattered just like the lie. He bent down, picked up a shard, and looked at his own reflection in it, cut, bruised, awake. And for the first time in a long time, he smiled. Not because everything was fine, but because the storm was finally over, and he had survived it. It took 2 years. 2 full years of silence, of starting over, of rebuilding a life that had been designed around betrayal. Emeka poured himself into his company. He restructured everything from the inside out, cleaned out the rot, replaced every person who had once bowed to Chidi's influence. He opened a new branch in Abuja, hired young minds with hungry hearts but honest intentions, refused bribes, walked away from shady deals, became the kind of man he wished he had been earlier. But the most important change was invisible to balance sheets and annual reports. Emeka had learned to see people. Where once he had looked at employees and seen only functions, he now saw individuals with names, families, dreams. He started eating lunch in the company cafeteria instead of his private office. He remembered birthdays. He attended weddings and funerals. He listened, and with time the scars began to fade. He started going on walks again. He started eating with joy. He even started smiling without forcing it. When love came knocking again, it didn't come loud. It came gently, through a woman he met at a charity auction, Dr. Folklore Ademoye, a pediatric surgeon who ran free clinics in Lagos slums. She didn't care about his last name or his bank balance. She cared about books, children, art, the quiet things that feed the soul rather than the ego. He didn't rush it. He didn't announce it. But when he held her hand one evening under the stars, watching her laugh at something silly he'd said, he knew this time it was real. "You're different from what people say about you," she had told him during one of their early dinners. "That you're cold, calculating." "Maybe I was," he admitted. She studied his face in the candlelight. Emeka reached into his pocket and withdrew the cowrie shell Amaka had given him. It was still warm, still smooth, still carrying whatever mystery had guided his steps back to sanity. "Someone taught me how to see clearly," he said. 3 months later, something happened that completed the circle. Emeka was at his office when his assistant knocked on the door. "Sir, there's a young man here to see you. He says it's urgent." The young man who entered was perhaps 28, well-dressed but nervous, carrying himself with the careful dignity of someone who had important things to say but wasn't sure how to say them. "Chief Okafor," he began, "I work for Pinnacle Holdings. I've discovered irregularities in our company's recent dealings." My CEO, Mr. Emeka, felt a familiar stirring, the same recognition that had once filled Amaka's eyes when she looked at him. "Tell me more," he said gently. As Adebayo spoke, revealing corruption, planned bankruptcy fraud, innocent investors about to lose their life savings, Emeka found himself reaching into his pocket, his fingers closed around the warm cowrie shell Amaka had left him. "You're afraid," Emeka observed. "Yes, sir." If Mr. Emeka smiled, recognizing words that could have come from his own mouth 2 years earlier. He stood up, walked around his desk, and placed a fatherly hand on the young man's shoulder. "Would you like to know something, Adebayo? 2 years ago, I was saved by someone who saw what others couldn't see." He opened his palm, revealing the cowrie shell. It seemed to glow in the afternoon light streaming through his office windows. 6 months later, on a quiet evening when Lagos traffic hummed its familiar lullaby, and the air carried the scent of rain that had not yet fallen, Emeka sat in his garden with Dr. Folek, watching fireflies dance between the flowers she had helped him plant. "You're different tonight," she said, her head resting on his shoulder. "Peaceful." "Maybe I have," he said, thinking of the cowrie shell now resting in Adebayo's pocket, of the young man who had successfully exposed his corrupt boss and saved hundreds of investors from ruin. "Maybe home isn't a place." Folek lifted her head to look at him. "To see clearly, to help others see clearly." As if summoned by his words, a gentle breeze stirred the garden, carrying with it the faint sound of singing, ancient melodies that seemed to come from the earth itself, songs that spoke of circles closing and new circles beginning, of stories that end only to birth new stories. Somewhere across the sprawling city of Lagos, in a modest flat in Surulere, where a small family gathered around their dinner table, a father named Kunle Adebayo looked up from his plate of rice and stew to see his son entering the house with a smile that had been missing for months. Kunle asked, "Very well, Papa." Young Adebayo didn't tell his father about the cowrie shell in his pocket or about the strange sense of destiny that had guided him to Chief Emeka's office. He simply sat down with his family and gave thanks for food, for safety, for the courage to do what was right even when it was difficult. But that night, as Legu settled into sleep and millions of dreams began to weave themselves into the fabric of tomorrow's possibilities, Adebayo lay awake thinking about circles and connections, about the way one person's courage could ripple outward like stones thrown into still water. And in a small house in Mushin, where the walls were thin and the furniture humble, but the hearts within were vast as oceans, an old woman named Mama Ngozi sat beside her granddaughter's bed, stroking the young woman's fevered brow. "Tell me the story again, Mama," the girl whispered. Mama Ngozi smiled, her weathered hands gentle as a morning rain. "Which story, my child?" "The one about how the ancestors send help when we need it most." "Ah," the old woman nodded. "That story." As she spoke, neither grandmother nor granddaughter noticed the young woman who had just arrived at their front gate. A woman with ancient eyes and a young face, carrying a small bag and wearing the simple clothes of someone seeking domestic work. Amaka stood in the darkness beyond their window, listening to the old woman's voice weave tales that had been true since the first human heart learned to beat in rhythm with a cosmic drum. She waited patiently as she had learned to wait, knowing that morning would bring introductions, that this family's crisis would reveal itself in time, that her purpose here would unfold like a flower opening to receive the sun. For this is how the eternal dance continues, guardian after guardian, story after story, each ending becoming a new beginning, each saved soul learning to become a savior in turn. The spirits watch from corners of vision and crossroads of choice. They send their messengers when the balance tips toward darkness, when pride threatens to destroy humility, when greed masquerades as love. And sometimes, if you know how to listen, you can hear them whispering in the wind that stirs the leaves of ancient trees. The work continues. The circle remains unbroken. And wherever a heart calls out for truth in a world of lies, someone will be sent to answer. This is the way of things. This has always been the way of things. This will always be the way of things. In the great city of Lagos, as in every city where human hearts beat and human dreams take flight, the keepers of shadows move among us, invisible to those who prefer comfortable illusions, clear as daylight to those ready to see. Chief Emeka Okafor learned to see. He learned to save. He learned that the greatest wealth is not what we accumulate, but what we give. Not what we hoard, but what we share. Not what we take, but what we leave behind for those who follow. And somewhere in the turning of night toward dawn, in the space between sleeping and waking, where all truths live, the ancestors smile and nod their approval. The circle is complete. The story ends where all good stories end, with a promise that it will begin again, wherever it is needed most. And so it continues, from generation to generation, from heart to heart, from shadow to light, and back to shadow again, in the eternal dance of those who see clearly and those who choose blindness, those who save and those who need saving, those who understand that every ending is simply a doorway to a new beginning. The fire burns low, but it never dies. The story ends, but the truth continues. The circle closes, but the dance goes on. Forever and always, world without end.